Welcome to the Coast to Coast podcast, brought to you by Play Picks and the Lines. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by my guy Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we are back in action with a nice full 8-game slate here tonight on Thursday night after that all-star break. We are going to look to continue to stay hot with everything we've got for you today, a couple game videos and our player props video. So do make sure you are liked and subscribed to that page and check those out. In this one, we're talking about the T-Wolves taking on the Memphis Grizzlies in Minnesota. Nate does have his great article up as well on playpicks.com with some best bets and player props in there for you. So check that out as well. And as always, if you do still need a FanDuel or DraftKings account, head to fdpicks.com or dkpicks.com and find those listings in your area, such as what we've got for tonight. Nate, let's get back into it.
Yeah, it's good to be back, right? Long break for the All-Star break, but we got some good games here on Thursday night. Full slate, pretty much. Memphis is -1.5 in Minnesota right now. That's moved from the Grizzlies opening around 3.5 favorites. I'm not really sure why we're getting action on the Wolves, but we'll get into that. The total's sitting pretty steady at 240 points. Pretty damn high, but that's what we've come to expect when Minnesota suits up. Looking at the other games on this Thursday night, we got Cavs -7 at the Pistons. The Celtics are -9 at the Nets. We've got some good news regarding Kyrie Irving, but he will not yet be available for home games. No Ben Simmons, no Goran Dragic, and no Kevin Durant, of course, for the Nets there. The other game we will break down is Hawks +3 at the Bulls. Total of 238 there, also very high. The Suns are -10 at the Thunder. They are without Chris Paul, though, the rest of the season. The Warriors are -10 at the Blazers, who might be without Yusuf Nurkic the rest of the season, at least a month. And then the Nuggets -4.5 at the Kings. Memphis and Minnesota here. Some pretty stark home road splits for Minnesota. That we've talked about all season. They tend to go over way, way more often on the road. Their defensive rating is 10 points better at home on the season. And if you break it down to their last 15 games, defensive rating 121, their last 9 on the road, defensive rating of 109, their last 6 at home. They've won 5 of those 6, but they haven't faced a team of this quality necessarily. And their last home game, their last game before the break, was a 103-91 loss to Toronto. And when we're talking about a week off here, you don't really want to look at the recent sample size as much. There's so much time for teams to break down game film and install new things. And these teams, both of them, really have a lot of work to do on the defensive end lately. And it's not necessarily a personnel issue. Minnesota has good wing defenders. They've done a great job protecting the paint, which is key for this matchup because Memphis makes the 5th fewest threes at the 7th lowest rate. Their percentage is even worse without Dillon Brooks, who's still out. But Memphis leads the league in paint points for about the 3rd straight season, which is how they went into the break with the number 1 offense, scoring 125 there. So my first thought is that at 240, I would rather take the under as these teams come out of the break. You see teams with a rest advantage generally go more to the under. That is this situation with the Wolves, who are 6-5 to the over when they're at least on 2 days rest. But that's not as stark as their home road splits. Again, 24-7 to the over on the road versus 12-16 to the over at home. And we're talking about going under by 7 points per game at home versus they go over by an average of 8.5 on the road. So it's just a big total here. The last time these teams met, Memphis held the Wolves to 108. They won by 116-108. The previous time, the Wolves held Memphis to 95 and scored 138 in just kind of an anomaly. But I do like Memphis to just win here, and this spread is probably more exploitable at this point than the total as it continues to creep down to a pick'em. They've won 8 of their last 9 against the Wolves. They've covered in all of those wins. And so I would consider parlaying that modest spread with the under because Memphis, tends to lock down when they get these wins. In the case of their last win against Minnesota, that's plus 250, or just taking Memphis to win however you want to slice that total.
Yeah, for sure. That's crazy to me about Minnesota's not just the obviously the difference in their offense on the road and their defense on the road and versus at home. But Vegas can't figure them out. They go right. They go way over the total when they're on the road. They go way under the total when they're at home. It sounds like they haven't really moved the spread in favor of what that's going to be like. But I'm way more in favor of just attacking the spread here. I think when we both saw this opening line come out, it seemed like this was probably going to move a bunch towards Memphis. Still a very, very good road team, right? It seems like everything would point towards less than 240. But that also probably got bet up. Either way, it started, like you said, really, really high in terms of the opening total as well. I thought the spread would have moved, in favor of Memphis to the points you're making. 9-2 straight up as a road favorite, covering that spread by about 7 points. I mean, that's wild to me. 24-10 straight up as the favorite on the season. I think there's a couple of things here. Minnesota's had a couple games against some decent teams, but I think it's a situation of Memphis definitely, taking care of business against lesser opponents this season. You look at some of the numbers here for a couple of the guys on the squad, including Desmond Bane and John Morant. Both seem in their last 5 appearances against teams with a winning record, scored over 23 points each of those 5 games. So, there's clearly something there to that sort of big game mentality for Memphis. Obviously, we know they beat Golden State earlier in the season as well, and came out and sort of set a statement with that game. But also just Minnesota's lack of ability, to score as much at home earlier in the season. They've totally taken off and gone the complete opposite direction. Now that in their last 6 at home, as you mentioned, scoring 121 points a game with that less than 109 defensive rating. That really to me is mostly about the total. As I do still think the numbers for Memphis, and as we know where they like to score, is down low, definitely not against the 3, which is really where Minnesota does a lot of their defense. That's where it's best anyway. So I think this is one where it's simple enough for me that if this spread is going to keep dropping, especially, I would take Memphis, feel comfortable about them up to about -4, to be honest. And that spread, I would prefer the under just because of that Minnesota at home. I hate seeing a total of like 103-91 in Minnesota and then going, and I'm expecting them to score 240 points this time. I don't like that anomaly there. And like you said, coming out of the break, we don't know how these teams are going to be shooting necessarily. But I do think that both these teams realize there's only 24 games left and the grind is now. And I think that favors Memphis a ton as they also get out and run. We know that, if you can't stop their fast break and you can't stop them in transition, then you're not going to have much of a chance against this squad. And I think that's going to be the case tonight as Minnesota's not as adept at their transition D.
Yeah, and when Memphis gets a little extra rest, that fast break game is even better. And they're 11-2 right now when they get at least 2 days of rest. So that's another key there. As you mentioned, great road team. 9-2 straight up when they're the road favorites, and they're covering by an average of 6.7 points per game in those situations. 24-10 straight up as a favorite, regardless of the venue. And Minnesota is a team we've talked about doesn't win the games when they're underdogs, and they win when they're expected. They're 22-8 as favorites, 9-20 as underdogs, failing to cover by an average of 5 points per game there. But I do also come back to the defense. I like this theory that with extra time to prepare for a Memphis team that is extremely athletic, but can be contained if you kind of pack it in because they lack shooting right now. I think Minnesota comes out and plays a little bit better defense and keeps this over such a crazy total. For credit D'Angelo Russell, I guess, for his individual defense. They're actually 5 points better on defense when he plays. That's in a 14-game sample. And I don't really see Minnesota blowing up on the other side of the ball against a well-rested Grizzlies team. Karl Anthony Towns has kind of struggled his last 3 against Steven Adams, averaging 20.5 points with an offensive rating of 106. So I see 240 kind of being way too high in this situation. But again, I would want to parlay that with the Grizzlies to get that extra juice rather than stretching the spread in any way. And I would have no problem just taking Memphis up to -4, like you said.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, the other thing to consider here for why, the under feels like it's right. John Morant doesn't have great numbers against Minnesota, or at least John Moranty numbers enough against Minnesota his last 5 times out against them, including one this season, a couple this all the way back to last season, essentially. Right. So we're talking 21.5 points for him, 8 assists, and 4 boards a game in that time frame. But, at the same time, Minnesota this season's gotten even better. It's weird. You mentioned D'Lo sort of being that pure point guard that also has been better. That the team has been better on defense when D'Angelo Russell's in the game. They've actually held opposing point guards, has Minnesota to the 6th fewest points per game this season, and I believe the 6th fewest as well in terms of assists given up to opposing point guards this season. They seem to like the ability to guard Ja. Obviously, Ant Edwards also a very athletic guy. Pat Bev not quite there, Pat Bev is there rather to be able to help as well. So I think there is something to the fact that Ja's points at 29.5 feel a little bit high actually at this point. But I mean, if this game does get to the total, then you feel a little bit more comfortable about some of these player props. But I think the fact that we both feel a little bit better about an under here before we take an over, I don't really feel comfortable taking any of those player props there. It actually just makes me feel better about taking under, knowing that the catalyst for the entire Memphis offense is someone who has been held in check, at least according to how well he's playing normally. 22 points for him, well below his average on the season and even last season. So I think what we're saying here is definitely feel really, really good about Memphis there. And then if you feel like the total needs to be hit, preferably under for us as well. But that is all the time we have for you in this one. Make sure you are liked and subscribed to that page and check out those other couple videos we have for you on this big Thursday night slate. And until we see you next, happy betting.